you need to have a level of intellect higher than the level of intellect that took you to identify the problem.
Yeah. To
Right?
find the solution.
Yeah,
True.
exactly. Who said this? I can't recollect. Somebody said this. If you don't know who said it, it's attributed to Rumi, isn't it?
I believe so. Or Einstein.
Einstein, yeah, there
Other
you
two
go.
people, yeah, depending on how poetic or
Yeah.
logical it is, yeah. Hi there. Thank you so much for joining me one more time on the Absolutely Right podcast, India's first graphology based podcast show. My name is Aditi Surana. I'm a behavioral analyst, a high performance coach, and an anti anxiety expert. One of my tools to analyze behaviors is graphology or handwriting analysis, and the show, specifically the Wednesday episode, is completely based on that. But before I get into the description of it, I was reminded of a small little story from my childhood. My father was an art director, and I wanted to become a filmmaker because every time I went with him on his sets and looked at the world and the cameras, I was fascinated by it. And I was curious. So I kept asking questions. I'm like, why should I do this? What is that? What is that? You know how kids are. One day my father said, "Oh, if you want to become a director, you have to find your characters in real people." And I said, "Yeah, that's true. That makes sense." And now look at it, and I feel he just wanted me to not bother him with all the questions. So he gave me the task of observing people. As you can imagine, after all these years, I haven't stopped doing that. Our guest on the show is also a keen observer who loves to walk into the most complicated problems and find a solution to it. He is an international badminton player, a Guinness Book of World Record holder, a mentor on United Nations project, and a startup investor, besides being the chief marketing officer of IBM Southeast Asia. Our guest Arun Cavale is on Forbes' top 50 best marketing and communications leaders in Asia list and was awarded the most influential global marketing leader award by World Congress Marketing. In today's conversation, he spoke about a powerful concept called executive presence, where he says every time you make your decision and you build your team, it all happens through all the strategic choices, but at the same time, being the presence, the executive presence that you're supposed to be. Check out that part, it's really interesting. Without further ado, let's start the conversation with Arun. Make sure that you keep your handwriting samples around because as I analyze him, you will get to discover some interesting parts of your own personality. Let's get started. Hi, Arun. Welcome to Absolutely Right. I am thrilled to have you on the show because of your obviously the career and the high performer that you are, but more importantly, your interest in sports and other work that you do as on a social level. I want to know about all of it, and our listeners are keen to know what makes you this successful. What is the secret behind? What behavioral traits do you possess? And let's dive directly in that aspect of your life and story. So please tell us where your interest of badminton started.
Okay, good afternoon, Aditi, and happy Friday. I don't know when this is going to get telecasted, but it is Friday today, and I'm happy.
Okay, great. Good reason to be happy about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why not? Okay, my badminton, I won't even call it as a hobby. It's really my passion. My life is at the intersection or trijunction of three circles. There's my family, there's the work that I do, which is around marketing and technology marketing in particular, and badminton. So my life is right
Clearly
at the
divided.
trijunction in that. It's right there in the trijunction of these
Okay.
three circles, right? So that's the passion I have for the sport, and it started, I guess, I was 11 and a half, 12ish. My first
First
marriage was
love.
to badminton.
Oh, okay.
um, and it started there, and it started like for a lot of kids my age. I mean, I grew up in Bangalore,
Hmm.
the 80s kid in
Hmm.
Bangalore. So it started off as somebody dragging me along to a summer camp. I mean, you didn't have video games, right? So you had all the time in the world.
Yeah.
So I went there, and yeah, so there were a bunch of kids. So I saw the bunch of kids. I was like, this is cool, right? There's a ton of kids. I mean, what more do you want as a kid,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So started playing. The summer holidays, 2 months came and went, and then by then I was a little hooked. And then my deal with my parents was, till the next exam comes in, I'm going to play. So it was balancing. It was a balancing act. My deal with my parents was, as long as your academics don't suffer, you are free to do whatever you want, right? I mean,
I
so
also
that,
feel it's a very South Indian parenting. Like my father was Telugu, so we were brought up in like complete disciplinary and South Indian style. So I hear you.
yeah. So it started that way in a very accidental manner.
So when did
Um,
you realize that this is something that you want to take it seriously or you want to pursue it in a long run? When did you get married to this sport?
um, I don't know if I can answer when I got married, but I know when the love affair really started.
That.
It's more of I remember one of those little tournaments there, one of those state level tournaments. Um, I remember Prakash Padukone,
Yeah.
who was, if I recollect right, he was either the president or secretary or something of the Karnataka Badminton Association for a very short time of
Okay.
yeah, around early 90s, I think. He was there and he saw and he went and asked someone, who's this boy? And
My
then
God.
he spoke to me, and it was like, for
For a
someone who's,
child, yeah.
I used to collect, I don't know if you remember, there used to be this magazine called Sports Star.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen my
yeah,
father collecting it. Yeah.
yeah. So I still remember, I think it must be still there somewhere in one of my old files. There was
Cuttings,
a
huh?
cutting of Prakash
Oh.
playing his. So I remember cutting that picture and keeping it and treasuring it. And here is this picture in life. Is
Life,
standing
yeah.
there and he's talking to
Wow.
me. I mean,
But
that's every kid's
that's
dream
like
come true.
that's like meeting Michael Jackson or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably what kicked it off, and then it went
Wow.
on. I must also tell you, Aditi, it's very, very interesting because I think I had I gave up badminton, somewhere in the middle of my engineering life.
Okay.
Various reasons, right? I think the timing was an issue, and so on and
Mm.
so forth. And then I went through 12 years, the next 12 years, which included my completion of engineering, getting my first job, uh, going into B school, dating my then girlfriend, now wife, having, getting married to her, having a child, all of that.
So
And
almost like a Karavas for like 12 years, Vanvas or something. Okay.
yeah, just short of 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, these 12 years, my family, my wife, my kid had no clue about my badminton past
No.
because I was so
Yeah.
past in.
The way you're saying it, my badminton past sounds like some relationship from the past that emerged suddenly. Okay. Then.
I call it my love affair.
Yeah.
So one fine day, 2007,
Mm.
2007 Jan 7th, I think. Oh, I remember the date. Like every new year, you do your new year resolution. My new year resolution was, I was 30 something at that point, and I was looking like a 40 something South Indian uncle. So I was like, I got to do something about myself. This can't be me.
Right.
And I went to the gym like every other person does, and I got so bored within 3 days. I said, this is not me.
Okay.
And then just driving out of one of those malls, my wife and I, and there's a small little badminton club there. I remember many, many years ago as a kid, I had gone there a few times. Now the president of that club, he happened to see me and he stopped the car. He spoke to me.
Okay.
He said, aren't you this guy? I said, yeah. And then we spoke and he said, why don't you come and play? I actually parried him a few times. I said, yeah, I'll come, next Tuesday, next Thursday, and
Right.
just parrying him. But at some point, I couldn't. I had to turn up because he was so insistent. And yeah,
Thanks to him.
2007, something March or something, and then here we are now. Well, I played the old man's world championships.
Wow.
I kept in the Singapore Masters team. It's. I mean, like I always say, if you're destined for something, it'll come to you even if you run away from it, right?
True.
So now today, I mean, the fact that I get to play with former
Best
Olympic gold medalists and world
Wow.
champions, it's like sometimes I really pinch myself and say, is this true? Is this happening?
Oh my
But, yeah.
God. So I have a question. Okay. So I do study and I interview athletes and we always talk to different leaders on our show. So what do you learn from the sport or the competitive behavior from there and implement as a leader?
Sure. I think a large part of my work personality, or personality in general has been shaped definitely by those experiences in badminton, both childhood badminton experiences as well as the continuing engagement with the game, with the sport. I think the most obvious and fundamental piece is, as an athlete, you are trained to go all in. I mean, there is no midway, right? I mean, you go out there, you. It's not just sweat that you leave behind, right? You leave behind your blood.
Yeah, of course. And
But
you're either 100% or zero. So that's like,
yeah, you're all in. As far as your input is concerned, there's no in between.
Holding back.
0 or 100, right? The switch is on and you're on.
Right.
But the beauty of it is, once it's done, I don't hang on to the outcome. Sometimes the outcomes are in your favor, sometimes you lose. So it's you move on. You move on. I see a lot of people
lingering
all
way
around.
Too much.
Yeah, who, when things don't go right, at least it doesn't go to their expectations, it sort of derails them for a long time. They fail to get past that. But to me, I think I would credit my ability to just move on, primarily due to those sporting experiences, which is, I think, fundamental life lesson and not just a career lesson.
So as I understand, you play singles.
I play both.
Okay. So it's also like the team and actually taking care of the other person and functioning like that. All of that is also implemented. So anything related to team building or, in a way, connecting to other person that we can derive as a parallel from?
As a young player, I would think that badminton is an individual sport. Right. But now, I mean, it is still an individual sport in the sense that on the court, it's just you or you and your partner, depending on singles or doubles. But it's definitely not an individual sport, because there's a whole army of people who support you. I mean, whether it is the coaches or the physios and the masseurs or just your family. I mean, I have a teenage daughter, and I have I think in dog years, a teen dog. They demand my time, and here I am, a crazy dad who just goes off 4 times a week, so it is definitely a team sport. It's just that one person is there to play, but there's a whole army of people behind. So respecting that, recognizing that is a critical. Again, it's a life lesson to me. I mean, respecting people. I mean, not everybody contributes in the same way, but everybody does contribute significantly. May not be in the same way that you think is important.
And the way you expect them to, in a way. Yeah. Great. So I want to dive deep into our conversation around graphology and talk about certain specific traits. So do you have your handwriting handy with you?
Yes.
Okay. I also am going to request our listeners to keep their handwriting with them. If you don't have it, pause, write something for 2-3 lines and sign there, so that when I'm analyzing Arun, you can actually look at your own handwriting and learn some interesting facts and things about yourself. So here we are. The first thing that stands out about your writing is the thickness of... He's crossing his fingers for our listeners who didn't see why I laughed at this moment. So when you use thick pen to write, which is like a preference, which is, something that you always enjoy, I believe, it comes from the fact that you, as a person, you're very sensually driven, which means every single experience, when it comes to all 5 senses, is derived and observed very deeply. So if I talk about your preferences or your understanding in taste, in music, in different, even differentiating between delicate fragrances, it's very well thought through. You do not take these things for granted. If you're looking for a particular shade of color, you know exactly what you're looking for. If you're looking for a particular flavor, you know exactly what you're looking for. You might not be showing your disappointment. You might not be, critical about it, but you're very, very clear about it. And if given a choice, when you have time on hand and when you're creating something, you really put in that extra effort to make sure things fall in place to that. I would not use the word perfection, but to that exact measurement.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize you could say so. You could take so much away from just the the thickness of the pen.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it, what you just described, is very, very apt. Though my teen daughter may not fully agree that I have a fine sense of appreciation of colors, but
Okay, I think we can't compete with her on that one.
I mean, you're never good enough. Dad is never good enough for a daughter when it comes to fashion sense and when it comes to some of these things. But I do think that my sense of smell, for instance, right? I collect fragrances. I try and review fragrances. So yeah, I'm very, very particular about smells and what goes on my skin. And being, I think you probably spoke about obsessiveness and obsessive behavior without saying as much, without using those words. That perfectly characterizes me. I mean, even now I'm sitting here, everything is, the piece of paper that I have is exactly at 90 degrees to the table. It's not so yeah, I mean, it is a pain most of the times, but not having it that way is a bigger pain.
Another degree. I can imagine. I can totally imagine. So just to clarify, it is not about using a thick pen for our listeners who are tuning in. It is moreover about having a preference with the ink flow, having a preference of writing always with a thicker ink flow, which allows you to feel comfortable. Some people feel uncomfortable if they are given like 0.5 or 0.7. Now that choice is subconsciously your mind expecting you to create that flow, talking about that extra attention that you give. And this is such a small subconscious choice. We don't even pay attention to it. But the beauty is in those micro choices, you'll end up discovering the real personality, which otherwise we forget because, we are so busy speaking in a particular manner, all acquired and trained behaviors. But when you take all of that away, and if you let the person be without any conscious choice, is I believe where you really discover a person. So this is how the graphological aspects can talk about. I'm blushing. I always blush about talk. Whenever I talk about graphology, I blush. So yeah.
But do these things change, Aditi? I mean, it's interesting because I remember for a while when I was in engineering, I used to have this, some fascination and preference for this supremely sharp pencils and those is it 0.05 mm? Those 0.5 mm, very fine pens. But now yeah, you're right. Now I prefer thick gel pens.
It happens actually as we grow, so because graphology or handwriting is a representation of who you are, and because you keep changing, it must change. It's like your mirror image, right? If you change and if it doesn't change, then you're like, oh, it's a photograph. It's not a mirror image. The fact that you're changing and now you feel like making different choices in these, and as we will dive deeper, you'll see how every small curve, every extra dot would actually reveal deeper aspects of our personality. And this is what we do not choose because we know we want to do it. We do it because this is a style, this is my flow, this is how I like it, and that still reveals them. That's the best part.
Wow.
So Arun, as I look at your writing, when you connect one letter with the other letter, there is an angular formation to it. So, which means sometimes the strokes go very sharp up and sometimes they go a little soft. But that sharp connection, and I want to talk about how one letter is connected to the other, talks about how one thought is connected to the other. So you do have long connections in your writing, which means the words like management or characterizes are all connected in one single stroke. You do not pick up the pen other than dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Now that talks about somebody who picks up a process and goes to the end without dropping it. You literally have like these linear processes that run even when you're doing your everyday work, or if you have your internal processes well defined. So people may think that you are very good at it when dealing with people or your team members, but not necessarily. Even given a choice with your hobby or with your everyday work, you think like that. And a person who thinks like that also lands up implementing these processes everywhere.
Oh, wow. I mean, this is again uncanny because, yeah, I mean, if I were to put out my strengths, I think ability to, we call it systems thinking, which is to think of the bigger picture and how the individual components
come together
to make the bigger one come alive. I think that this
And
is definitely
also,
something.
sorry,
Go
and
ahead.
also like do it flawlessly. So it's not only coming together, but seeing all the repercussions that every component would have on other. That is
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I definitely call as a strength of mine, which is to sort of, you know, in fact, not just do it for myself, but also encourage my team to, actively think of something beyond just the mere task that they're currently working on, and drive a sense of co-ownership
Yeah,
for the larger picture.
right.
Because I mean, there are enough memes out there, right? I mean, you could either be looking at yourself as cutting, blocks of stone, or you could be looking at yourself as a temple builder, or
Yeah,
so unless you, as a leader, unless you clearly communicate the larger objective, the larger end game, you are never going to get complete, engagement
true.
and ownership from the team, right? As long as they don't define themselves as part of a meaningful whole, they are never going to be connected, right? And which means that you become your own bottleneck, right? And you're going to be tracking, if it's three people, you're going to be tracking three people. But what happens if you're running 300 people team? Then
Right.
you're dead. You can't do anything with it, right?
I
So
want to actually ask you a question here. So when you're doing like the meaning, like in your work, and I'm also referring to so many studies that spoke about how bringing in meaning to your work actually becomes an emotional and physically thriving experience. We can do that to a mission that is completely driven by, say, a social outcome. We can do that to a small startup where you have an impact that you're creating. How about corporates? How do you land up creating an impact by doing your day-to-day job? I was asked this question recently by one of my clients, and she's like, it was easier when I could see and feel the impact I was directly creating when I was dealing with customers. But now that I head a large team, I don't experience that. So,
yeah, I mean, I can only answer for myself and my
sure.
team. I'm sure there are many models out there, but just my model of what seems to be working for me, right? Which is, my team is not a big team, so it's still, I still have a lot of FaceTime, virtual time,
Literally FaceTime.
with people. So I guess what really is important, and I emphasize that, I don't think I can emphasize this enough, right? Which is, we are part of a large organization. I mean, my company is a massive company.
Sure.
Now, if I can hold to my corporate ambition or corporate objective that our chairman lays out. Maybe that vision is compelling enough and tangible enough and meaningful enough for every single person in the organization. Perfect. But sometimes it is not.
True.
So, which means that as a leader at every level, I think we need to sort of cascade that down to something more meaningful, something that we can feel. I mean, if for instance, many companies put out, I'm going to deliver X cents of dividend or X dollars of dividend to the
Sure.
market. What does it mean to somebody who's working in India? What does it mean to someone working here? It doesn't mean
True.
much.
Mm.
So unless as a leader, we sort of cascade that down to, so if you're going to drive X dollars of dividend to the shareholder, it
Mm.
means you're going to drive whatever millions or billions of dollars of revenue.
Mm.
And that revenue has to come from certain geographies, certain business units.
Mm.
And this is my contribution to that. So if I'm going to drive so much of contribution to that, that becomes my goal that we are setting up for this team. So I think cascading down of the goal to a level which people can live with and
Relate to.
touch and feel, right, and relate
Yeah.
to.
True.
If you don't do that as a leader, I personally feel we'll never be able to drive co-ownership. I mean, it's like it's just somebody's number, and yeah, I mean,
Yeah. You're
it's
just
not
kind of
something I can
driving
feel.
towards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, with your analytical thinking and also, I may say, argumentative behavior, and I'm going to talk about both of these things now, you have a side that very few people are aware of. That is, you're extremely emotional when it comes to the the people that you care about. Now, when you are talking to these people, the logical, the so-called, the perfect, the otherwise, the persona that people are aware of, is not available. So very few people and family members would be aware of it. And I'm saying that there are three traits I combined to talk about this. So the first one, the angular connection that I was referring to, talking about the analytical and very to the point kind of conversations that you love to have. Second trait is of argumentativeness. When you write your letter P, there is an antenna formation on the top. And anyone with that antenna formation and little gap on the top, the way you have in your letter P, talks about, depicts that the person is argumentative when he's very, very convinced about the point that he believes in. That once you decide that this is what you want to stand by, it is extremely difficult for people to convince you otherwise until the logic is proven by multiple resources. Or one person cannot drive it to a point where they can win the argument easily. And the last point I said, the emotions take over, because when you write your letter V, so many times the formation at the bottom is softer. So people with that specific letter turning into U formation show that they are emotional where the close relationships are concerned. Over to you.
Very apt, I would say. So the emotions part, maybe I'll just address that first. I think it's true. Yeah, especially when it comes to a small set of people. I'm quite emotional and extremely protective. And while I have my hard rules on practically everything in my life, I think I classify myself as a disciplinarian, in the sense that I self-discipline myself more than I discipline anybody else in the world. And to some extent, that sort of spills over to the external world, right? So, but when it comes to certain people, certain circumstances, I can just go completely opposite, be a different person. Yeah. So that is very, very true. The argumentative personality is again appropriate. I think that's both a strength as well as a weakness that I deliberately need to focus on and work on, which I'm working aware of. I think it's I don't know if it's related to the education that I had the privilege of getting, which is about, as an engineer, I love math. So maybe I'm I'm an odd person out. I love math.
Me too, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, even maybe about 10 years ago or 7 years ago, till about 7 years ago, I used to sit and do calculus to pass time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I hear you. I hear you.
Yes. So for me, what it means is a lot of things in life. The danger for me is I can very quickly slip into a binary, right? Because math is in many ways very deterministic.
Right? Can be binary. Can build your perspective. Binary, yeah.
And the training in engineering and precision, and I'm still a big believer in process improvements in daily life. I mean,
as we just saw,
I can drive my family and myself up the wall with some of my some of the
processes.
Some of my processes. So yeah, I mean, what it means is some things you're very convinced that it's got to be this because there is a process to it.
Sure.
Probably that's a right position to take. But what I need to work on is the way that position is taken. And I think that's something that over the years I've definitely changed. Yeah, I think I leave it at that. I guess one of the key changes that we all make and need to make is focusing on the defining relationships as part of a win, as opposed to just the outcomes.
Well said. Well said. And I was about to tell you that when I talk to people about this one particular trait of argumentativeness, I always tell them to differentiate between the point that you're making and the person that you're speaking with. So when you realize you're talking to a child, you won't be as how we really mold our words and really put them in the context that the child can understand. Same can be remembered, and I know it's easier said than done, but if you start building that awareness that the person I'm speaking with is different than the point I'm making, slowly and steadily you still stay sharp and pick up all the data required to process the information, but you don't go as harsh on the other person. So what you're saying is the differentiation between the two. And well said, keeping the relationship context in mind.
I guess one of the questions that, given where I am in my life journey, one of the things that I always ask myself, and maybe that's something that you can help sort of get some thoughts around, is the question of purpose of life. Not life. I mean, it's not really about spirituality. It's about. I firmly believe we are here for a purpose in
Mm.
terms of the choice of career that we have, made, right? But how does one know, or how do I know for sure whether what I'm doing today is what I was meant to be doing? I mean, because what you are doing today is really a function of the choices that you made at some
Sure,
point, right?
sure.
So you, as much as you think that you are all, you came here with a very deliberate strategy. I mean, some decision that you made 20 years ago
Has
brought you.
affected. Yeah.
So how do I know whether the purpose, my purpose, and what I'm doing are aligned? That's a directional sense. Am I going in the direction that I was meant to go?
Mm.
I also have a slight addendum to that, which is along with the direction, the distance, or
Like
how
how
much
far?
of that potential have I realized? Because I guess I'm in my mid 40s now, so another, I need to be looking at what happens at retirement, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of things that you thought of as your future state is now.
Yeah.
Right?
You're
This is
living
my
it.
future. Yeah,
You're
I'm living
living
it,
it. Yeah.
right? So how do I know at the end of retirement, I look back and say, hey, I did what I was meant to do, and I did it to the extent I was meant to do.
Wow. Great question. Great. Both of them like amazing, loaded. And I would break them into three parts as I speak about it. I feel one is an experience, and one of the things that I did a lot of research on is how mind and body are connected, and how we are not our minds and our bodies. So we are literally using these two instruments to propel and move forward, do things, make decisions. But then you always have the sense. So the purpose question is about the sense you have with your life, and body and mind being the ways of achieving that. And the very moment you kind of build that context, suddenly you say, okay, then I can, do this much with my mind and do that much with my body, and I still have space to realize and be connected. So things that bring your body and mind alive can become your guiding system, like your little GPS, to know that I really truly come alive in this context, in this space. To give you an example, for you it could be sports. It won't be the general meetings that you do, but when you walk into a problem, when you're solving that one complex area, and you concentrate or you focus so much that you land up diving so deep that you discover yourself there, that your body and mind both come together, unite. And we also call it yoga, right? So in a way, that when you are in that yoga state, that communion state, you suddenly have more capacities available that you didn't know existed. I always feel those moments can become your GPS to know
Mhm.
whether you are on the purpose or not.
Right. So from
Because,
a career standpoint, I don't know if it's even fair for me to ask you this question, but let's see where it takes us,
sure.
right? From a career standpoint, how does one know that, for instance, I'm doing marketing for technology and so on. How do I know this is what I was meant to be doing? Because I was equally good at a lot of things.
Sure.
Um, how does one know this is the right career option? Or how do I know, okay, you can't go back in time, but at least moving forward, does anything in the handwriting analysis or suggest that maybe there are other strengths that you should look at, maybe there are some areas that you should steer away from, and things like that?
Okay. So, one of the ways to know whether you feel connected to your existing career or not is to know how focused or how dedicated you have been in a long run. So, handwriting talks about your current state of mind, yes, but it also talks about overall where your journey has been. So, for example, when I look at something called baseline, and they're very revealing, the imaginary line on which you write in graphology, and they're poetic, like, every small journey that you have gone through, you can see the variation they capture. And so many times people wonder how I'll end up telling them that, oh, the timeline wise this happened, and 5 years back you did this, and people are like, how is that possible? Is there any other math to it? Absolutely not. The baseline as a factor is so revealing that being observant of them, you can discover a lot about the person. In your case, if I look at the overall focus in life, that barring first few years of your career where you were still figuring out where your rhythm and where your dance lies, when you discovered your craft underneath, after that you haven't looked back. You always felt more and more engaged, and if I may use the word, consumed by the challenges in a positive way. So you walked into things and you felt, oh, this is what I wanted to do, and what if I stretch a bit more? And you were given next opportunity where you stretched further and you stretched further. So if I have to talk completely from a space of what your body is representing about your mind, I would say I don't see any dissonance there. I don't see any struggle there. I feel it was on the journey that you felt completely absorbed in.
Okay, cool. So I got on the right train.
I believe so. Having said that, the questions that you're asking, can I move forward and build a bit more? I feel yes, and that is mainly because I feel last 18 months, and I'm not only talking about the lockdown, I feel you haven't grown at the pace you would like to grow. And this is where the so-called frustration, irritation, that little, lack of, satisfaction is kind of getting in now, because you don't feel the goals that you wanted to achieve, and not external, more internal in your case, because most of it is internal, where you feel whether I'm doing the best job, whether I am delivering my best possible self here, that matters to you a lot.
Yeah.
So if you not grow in that manner, and if the speed of growth is not at a particular rate that you're used to, then you do fall into the existential kind of questions. Am I on the right path? Is it something I want to do? And I think it's not only for you, it's applicable to many of us. When we are not completely engaged and in one with what we are doing, we start feeling it is not meant for me. So please look at enhancing your challenges. That's how you will thrive much more in this area. One more point I wanted to make is the idea of flow. There are moments where, there's a book by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He speaks a lot about it, and many people have spoken about flow as the high performance state of mind. Now, if you devise a method to put your mind and body into this high performance state, for you, that would become a way to discover yourself further. Now I feel that is not happening. You're not necessarily discovering yourself, because the bar that you had set, which was very high for most people, was achieved 2 years back. Now you're like, where is my next thing? And what is that next thing? Do I have to rush? It's not about rushing, but it's about questioning and intensifying the flow for yourself, whether other people are watching or not. Luckily, your career kind of has supported that to happen, but I feel now you're at a point where you have to do it on your own.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I think it's also a function of the times, the last couple of years that we've all lived through and continue to live through. Cabin fever does funny things to different people. Right?
Yeah.
So there was an interesting statistic, Aditi, that I came across. I believe about 40% of employees, not just employees of my firm, but across the board, are planning to stop working because
40%.
40%. It's a massive number.
My God.
I mean, this is the impact of staying at home, not being able to go to office, meet people, just cabin fever, right?
Yeah.
So people are questioning why do we do what we do, and is it worth it, and things like that. Reprioritization of priorities, right?
That is colossal loss of the potential that we have built. 40% is huge.
Yeah, the future of work is going to be super different. I mean, I don't know if even offices, just to put it out there, right? I mean, we don't even know, we can't be sure that offices continue to function
the way they do.
The way they do. I mean, the way they did. Right? Because, I mean, people are so comfortable working from homes. All they're missing is, hey, I need to meet my socializing, right? So then maybe the offices could be just socialization hubs, right? You go there, you
hang out,
come back, have a cup of coffee, meet your colleagues, do some, whiteboarding, and then come back and do your rest of the job at home. So I mean, it's a completely different future of work.
What you're walking into.
Given that we are in the midst of once in a generation change in work, and relationships, and people reevaluating their own life priorities and so on. I think it's also an appropriate time for, personally for me, to ask myself from a leadership style perspective, um, clearly what has brought you thus far may not guarantee you, any further, right? So what needs to change from a leadership style? Is there anything in the handwriting analysis graphology that could help point some indication?
So more than graphology for this answer, I'm going to rely on my other training as a high performance coach. And one of the training modules that I'm certified to do is called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There" by Marshall
There you
Goldsmith.
go.
So I feel I spoke about, if I have to break it down and speak about behavioral traits and connect it to your next growth curve, I would say the internal ideas that you have and some projects that you're constantly working on. I'll give you an example. Now, when you spoke about your interest in math or sport, it is not because you're only competing. It is the problem solving that you are obsessed with. You want to take your skill to the next level. You want to see the impact that skill set or your thinking in that direction creates. Now, similarly, if you look at leadership skills, you used to do that a lot more. I would say please resume that problem solving in leadership for you to create your next learning curves and work towards it. You love projects, end result, and then going with complete energy to create that impact. You love that processing. Yeah.
And burnout. How does one? It's not that I'm facing the issue, but I'm always wary of both because of my sporting background, as well as I'm at an age where I see a lot of people around me burning out. Um, how does one avoid burnout? What can you do? Because one of the strengths that I see and widely recognized within my organization also is my ability to come up with creative ideas regularly. But my biggest fear is really, at what point does the tank run dry?
Okay. So, beautiful question again. The first one is, when we look at your ability to solve problems, I think that's your natural tendency. It is not what you have acquired, but as I was mentioning in the beginning, this is how you look at the world. So if you look at the world being all frames not being straight, you will go and straighten them because that's how you look at the world from. If you see people not being efficient with their solutions, you might not tell them or enforce your ideas, but you look at the world from a space, oh, but this can be done in a simpler manner. So if it's your natural tendency, it won't leave you. Okay. Now, will you run dry? Will you feel that the thoughts are not available or I'm not being as productive? I currently see a problem more than burnout is not being intense enough. So it is actually the contrary. People do feel that I am feeling little disinterested, probably because I have too much of work. For some people, and I'm talking about people who really enjoy what they do, and specifically in your case, after describing all the different behaviors that we have, I genuinely believe that the concern would be that you're not intensely involved in an experience instead of feeling that am I exhausted by it. Now, I have to quote Haruki Murakami here. He wrote a book on running. And he said, what I talk about when I talk about running, his memoir, where he talks about different observations he made about running and writing in that book. And he speaks about burnout there. He said, for writing and for running, if I want to decide when to stop, it is when I still have a little run left within me, I should stop. So if I go all dry in every attempt, then next morning I will not feel like, running myself dry one more time. But if I leave a little run within and I stop just before that, the next morning I still have the so-called, as I call it, romantic relationship still on with the work or the project that you pick up. Then you're not like, oh, this was so tiring. You're like, okay, I enjoyed and I stopped just before that. So I think that enticing aspect must continue.
Interesting. Cool. And I guess the final question.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just I'm going to stop at the
Thank
first
you.
page.
Very
the
kind
last
of
9
you.
pages.
Very kind of you.
I think one of the important things that I realize in any work environment is, especially as you transition from, you know, young professional, junior levels of management down to, higher levels. I think it's important for us to not just stop at your ability to garner respect, but also gather liking.
Hmm.
This twin play between respect and liking is so super critical,
Of course.
especially, I mean, I always say this, right? Respect gets you rewards when things are going good, but it is not your safety net. You need a safety net, and that safety net only comes from ability to gather liking, right? I mean,
Mhm.
people should like you irrespective of your eminence in that subject matter. So how does one deliberately, build this, and what, any tips for me, or professionals like me, in terms of what they can do to work on this aspect of balancing both respect as well as liking?
So the very moment it becomes liking, for which if you leave who you are and if you try to pretend and fit into other people's peanut gallery, you start creating that internal conflict. And we see many people, especially on social media and different platforms, where they're constantly delivering to the gallery and then running away, like not only walking, running away from who they are. And then suddenly they meet themselves at a juncture where they're like, am I really this person or not? So I feel being vulnerable and being who you are two very very crucial aspects of liking. Now most of the time we believe liking will only come when people relate to the pleasant aspect, but you'll be surprised, and more we talk about it and look at it, we connect to people's genuine raw stories and their struggles. Now if you show courage to talk about it, to kind of put that in the context that the other person can benefit from it and walk your truth, I feel at the end of it, it does lead to huge amount of, I would not say liking, but also in a way appreciation and people getting influenced by it, because your story and your authenticity creates direct impact on their life. Now what goes against it is where I see people who are committed to what they do tend to become righteous about what they do, so thereby they start dismissing other sides. So the very moment you become completely rooted in where you want to go and because you believe in it, if people become rude, if they become
Mm.
condescending, if they start discounting other people's value, their contribution, or I also feel their perspective which is not like yours, is where the respect and liking conflict begins.
Right.
The very moment you include them into the vision, or also like be tolerant of their ideas, it becomes a different story altogether. The point here is, after a point, and now it is still okay, we can switch off the Zoom calls, but if you're working with somebody in a close environment, and where people can see all the shades of your personality, after a point they do see through us, and they do see through our judgments and our irritations, and this is where we get caught in a genuine manner instead of just feeling it otherwise. So
Yeah, yeah. And it's so important, right? Especially, we work in multicultural environments. We cannot assume that what is appropriate in one culture, your home culture, is necessarily appropriate in somebody else's culture. So it's so critical that, sometimes I think the default position is a very sanitized position, and then you take it from there depending on how
sure.
much of comfort you have with that other person, right?
True. And also I feel as a culture, when you build it, it's such an evolving idea. You can't build it and believe this is what we do. Gone those days where people say, oh, this is our company culture. Now with the kind of mix and globalization and all the ideas coming together on a daily basis, the culture is, if you are inclusive, is probably the only way to survive,
Yeah,
and then liked or respected in that sense.
yeah. Cool.
So now my turn. I have my 10 pages of questions for you.
Phew.
So if we have to teach our listeners things from your experience as a professional and as a high performer that you are, what three things that stand out in your career journey and your life?
Okay. Can I give a little more than three?
Oh, please. Always welcome. Thank you.
No, I mean, jokes aside, I think one of the things, and thanks to the conversation that we just had, because a lot of these are not necessarily related to marketing or a particular line of business, right? It's just about, I think it's important to be a good human being first, and then you can be good whatever else, right?
True.
And there is a
Not
strong,
negotiable.
yeah, I mean, there is a strong correlation between the two, right? Yeah, I mean, so when I look at some of the things that I see, um, most of them are obviously acquired over the years, but I wish some of these had been given to me early on so that I would have had a longer platform and a longer time to dwell on those and improve on those, right? So maybe a few things. I think the most important piece here is, I know there's a lot of conversation and coaching around building a personal brand.
Right.
Sure, it is important to build a personal brand. It's also important to build a personal eminence, but I would like to step beyond the boundaries of a personal brand or a eminence and talk about executive presence.
Wow.
And how I differentiate exec presence from these two, personal branding and the eminence equation is, personal branding could be on any dimension. You could be seen as he's a fun person, he's a humorous person, this person is always late, this person is a very hardworking person. All of them are different attributes, and each of those attributes becomes your brand. On the other hand, a slightly more evolved version of that personal brand could be a personal eminence. But again, that personal eminence is, this person is a solid finance professional. This person is an expert when it comes to cross-border taxation. So it is less personal, more subject
functional.
matter. Functional, yeah. That gets you the respect. I think what I wanted to touch upon really, and ask our viewers and listeners here to really ask themselves what they are doing to improve upon, is really the question of exec presence and what we are doing to build our exec presence. What do I mean by exec presence is, I mean, if you just look around our own organizations and ask ourselves, who are the stars or who are the people that we really look up to? These are people who are, sure, they are known for something, but they're also people that you like, you respect, they inspire confidence and are seen to be genuinely good people. And there's a even if they're physically gone from that meeting or that place, there's a aura that hovers around. So if I were to look at what therefore we could do or focus on, I would like to offer maybe 5 things here.
Okay, great.
I don't know, let's start with 5, maybe it becomes 6, I don't know, let's see. But I think the primary lever to build on exec presence, in my view, is really to look at, you got to inspire confidence, and confidence comes from your ability to hold and manage your emotions well. I mean, if you are going through a tough time or a confused time, you are not going to another person who is more confused or equally confused. You're going to someone who you think has the demeanor and the calming effect on you, who can help you think through with more clarity, bring more clarity. So your ability to inspire confidence comes from your ability to work on your insights. I mean, I always say work on your insights. I think the external will figure itself out, right?
So do I, as a coach, I agree.
So I think that's my number one piece of advice in terms of defining and working on exec presence. The second aspect of exec presence that I would look at is really ability to generate respect. I mean, look, we are all in our professions for a particular reason, right? The fundamental, one of the foundations of that is our ability to bring something to our work, right? So we got to be known for something,
the value that we add.
The value. So as much as we work on, I mean, we spoke about this, it's important to generate liking, but liking without respect is,
Yeah.
It's a little, all fluff, no substance.
True.
So we got to have that ability. We got to be known for something, some subject matter. We got to own that subject matter. That's respect. Third piece, and I think it's increasingly critical for us, is really about going with a win-win attitude. I mean, very often we frame our sentences as something that is personal to you, which is always built in with a positive connotation. And then there is a but in between, and there is a other person's negative statement.
Sure.
For example, let me say, I wanted to run this campaign which would have gotten us $20 million in new revenue, but this person is a blocker. You take the statement. The first part of the statement can be characterized as, again, let's break it down. 3 parts. 1, it is about you. It is a personal statement. It is not about the other person. The first statement is a positive statement. It's not a negative statement. 3, it is a very specific statement. It talks about what you're doing and the impact it will have.
Right.
Now let's look at what comes after the BUT. Right. That statement is not about you, it's about the other person. That statement is a negative statement. That person is a blocker.
Right.
Not about what that person is doing. It's about that person, not about the person's task.
Right.
It's not objective, right?
It's personalized.
It's personalized.
Yeah.
And then again, that statement number 3 is not specific. It's a generalization of a person.
Of his character.
Of a character, right? So I feel if we tweak our framing of the problem, if we take away the but, put an and if we change the impersonal, the lack of objectivity, and the generalization of a character, and convert them into the same language that we used to frame the first part of the statement, we can easily make it seem like, for instance, I'm just
for example,
right? I want to run a campaign which will generate another $20 million in revenue, and this person will make it happen only if this person is provided with 2 additional resources. Now we have a way to solve the problem. The problem is potentially adding or giving this person 2 additional headcount, maybe on a temporary basis.
True.
So that it's not a win-lose or a lose-win. It is it's a win-win, and ultimately it's a win for the business.
So just Arun, before we go ahead, you're not only rephrasing the sentence, you're actually changing the perspective.
Yep.
You're saying, okay, as much credit I give to myself, and I consider my aspiration, if I give that much credit to the other person who I was judging as the blocker, and change what I can change about his situation to get the work done, is where I will move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I genuinely believe 99% of our so-called conflicts, we can always find a solution that creates a win to both sides.
True.
Easily, 99%, because as much as I believe I'm binary in my thinking, I think the business situations, 99% of those business situations are non-binary.
True. Absolutely.
So we can solve them. It's just
at the end of people working, and we can't be binary in many ways. So
absolutely. Yeah. So that's the piece around collaboration and our ability to focus on solutions and not problems, because I think it's important. Look, none of us is paid to identify
create
problems.
Yeah, sure.
Create problems, level, right? But
even identify.
Yeah, we are not paid to identify problems. We are paid to come up with solutions, right? I think we got to move to the next level. If I think, who said this? I can't recollect. Somebody said this. If you don't know who said it, it's attributed to Rumi, isn't it?
I believe so. Or Einstein.
Einstein, yeah.
Other 2 people, depending on how poetic or logical it is. Yeah.
They say that, you need to have a level of intellect higher than the level of intellect that took you to identify the problem.
Yeah. To
right?
find the solution. True.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we are paid to do that. So I think we got to focus on the solution. That's my the third piece. The final one is I think we got a network. There's no exec presence without networking, and the best way to network is sharing your expertise, right? I mean, what does it cost you to give a free advice if somebody is asking you for an advice? It not necessarily, it's never, I mean, everything need not be a power equation.
Right.
It could just be a friendly word that you put in, so that what goes around comes around, right?
Sure.
So building a network, sharing your expertise is the fifth lever that I will offer in terms of building that exec presence. So generate confidence, garner respect, because by standing up and being known for something, have those so-called critical conversations which focus on getting a win-win, collaboration that focuses on solutions and not problems, and finally this aspect of building your network.
So in this lockdown situation, how do you recommend people build network?
You will be amazed. I'll give you an example. If you think network building can only happen face to face, I'll give you an example. Recently, I was at it was a virtual gathering. It was a virtual wine tasting gathering for senior marketing professionals.
Wow. Okay.
A wine package came to my place, and at an appointed hour, we were, we joined on Zoom conference, and then we were tasting wine. We were talking to each other on, rating the different wines. I mean, things can be done. Things can be done. We may think that it can never be as good as face to face. Maybe it is true, maybe it is not, but that shouldn't stop us from taking that first step.
True. Great. That was great. So many points to carry home in one single conversation. Thank you so much, Arun. This was really interesting. Every time we have a guest, we always ask them, and this is my favorite question, and I'm going to ask you specifically with your background in sports and your passion for your work and sport together. How do you define failure, and what was your best favorite failure till date?
One of the things that I personally write down, in fact, when I look at my desk at home, there is a board, one of those that you use a Sharpie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
On that, I have ABL. I'm not a salesperson, so it is not an ABC for me. For me, it's ABL, always be learning. So if you don't learn, that's when it's a failure. If you're learning from it, I don't think it's a failure. And as a sportsman, that's my everyday. I mean, I turn up there. Some days I win everything. Some days I lose everything. Some days there's a mix. But you got to learn from it.
Sure.
If you're doing that, I don't think there is a failure.
And which is your favorite failure till date?
Favorite failure? Oh my God, there's been so many.
So like the one that stood out and you're like, oh, that was brilliant.
No, I mean, there's been quite a few in terms of the matches and, things that, you lost by 1 point to someone and that person went on to win World Championship, silver medal. And, so those things hit you.
Yeah, sure.
But,
yeah.
You go on. So there's always another chance.
Thank you, Arun. This was really great. Thank you so much for being part of our conversation, being on the show. And I hope to learn so much more from you in the coming future.
Thank you for having me. I think this was one of the most enjoyable discussions I've had. There's a lot of learning that I personally got, both as a mirror that I can see myself and all its flaws and all its strengths in, which is great. I think I believe in the power of self-introspection. I think that's important for everybody at every stage in their life to self-introspect. So this is I think a brilliant hour plus that we spend. Personally, great value for me, and thank you for hosting this session.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Absolutely Right podcast. If you have a story where you feel a raw, real conversation like this, or even our Friday episode has left a lasting impact on you, then do write to me. It's always wonderful to hear from our listeners and viewers. My email ID is write, @aditisurana.com. If you're as fascinated as I am with this whole subject of graphology and wish to learn it to analyze your team members, your family, your kids more than anything else, and yourself, of course, then you can learn the Graphology Masterclass. The link is mentioned in the description. You can find all the details on the website. After working with more than 18 years with leaders like these, we have created India's first mental and emotional fitness gym. The idea is simple. We require workout and diet to keep our bodies healthy and strong. But we don't do pretty much anything to keep our minds and emotions healthy and strong. So we create these weekly conversation and you get to practice it. You get to build a routine. You get to work with like-minded people and test yourself before making all these principles as part of your life. We have heard some amazing stories from our participants. If you want to be part of this community, then you can know more about it on this link, aditisurana.com/apt. A for aspire, P for perform, and T for transform. I'll see you on Friday with one more episode of the Absolutely Right podcast. Till then, happy writing.